So glad you can join us. Here's what we've got for you. Making the pitch to tackle Canada's problems.
Crime and chaos in our communities.
Why don't we just pay nurses more in the public system?
We have to give our armed forces the new resources.
The leaders on the campaign trail with just 14 days to go.
If there's a great amount of stigma happening, that can impact the outcomes of the child.
A new, healthier approach to addressing obesity.
I really do feel I can take on anything.
Plus going where no all-female crew has gone before.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
We are into the final 2 weeks of Canada's election campaign, with polls showing the Liberals are ahead by 7 points and Mark Carney is still the preferred Prime Minister. As for the issues, the notwithstanding clause became a point of contention between the leaders. And let's begin with what it is and why it's important. Here's CTV's Rachel Aiello with Pierre Poilievre's plan to get tough on crime. Rachel.
Sandy, as the campaigns converge in Quebec, today, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pledged to use a constitutional clause that allows for the overriding of charter rights to enact his tough-on-crime policies. If Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre becomes Canada's next Prime Minister, he's promising to make it possible once again for judges to issue consecutive sentences to those convicted of multiple murders.
Someone who takes multiple lives should be held accountable for each one.
To do so, he would invoke the notwithstanding clause to override a Supreme Court ruling that deemed such sentencing practices unconstitutional. In a case involving Quebec mosque shooter Alexandre Bissonnette, in 2022, Canada's top court struck down Harper-era criminal code legislation that Poilievre now wants to bring back. The Conservative leader said he'd be using Parliament's legitimate authority to act and would only invoke the contentious clause on matters of law and order.
We will only use Section 33 to fight crime. We will bring in the biggest crime crackdown in Canadian history to protect the constitutional charter rights of Canadians.
But experts in criminal justice and civil liberties expressed serious reservations about what Poilievre is proposing.
The politicization of this clause, using it in a manner where it's wholly unnecessary, that starts a slippery slope where the next use and the next use chips away at those basic freedoms that we have.
The Liberal and NDP leaders were also asked to weigh in, calling the Conservative approach dangerous and wrong.
We have a charter of rights and fundamental freedoms in this country, and it's the responsibility, in my view, of the Prime Minister or the Government of Canada to defend that charter.
I think we should not be using the notwithstanding clause. I'm concerned with the fact that it's being used more and more.
When asked to give an example of a mass murderer being granted parole, Poilievre didn't name one, stating his position is that Canada's most notorious killers should never be eligible to be set free. Sandy?
Rachel Aiello. And on this day 23, Liberal leader Mark Carney unveiled a made-in-Canada defence procurement plan, but he also had to apologize for some fake campaign buttons at a Conservative event. CTV senior political correspondent Mike Couture is travelling with the Liberals. Okay, Mike.
Sandy, Liberal leader Mark Carney says his government will succeed where others have failed in fixing Canada's military procurement program. It's something defense industry experts have said is a major hurdle to hitting our NATO targets. To fix that, Carney is proposing to establish the Defense Procurement Agency. He says it'll centralize the expertise across government and streamline the way the Canadian government buys equipment for the military. He also wants to prioritize buying Canadian when it comes to purchasing for military projects. Carney says Canada must build modern capabilities in a way that continue to grow out the economy.
Today, defense is not only about manpower, it's about brainpower.
Carney was just as unequivocal in denouncing the actions of a Liberal campaign worker who planted Trump-like buttons at a Conservative organization's conference last weekend. One of them said, "Stop the steal." and another had a bar through the name of Pierre Poilievre's campaign director, Jenny Byrne, and right under it had Corey Teneycke's name. Teneycke was Doug Ford's campaign director, and he's been increasingly critical of the federal Conservatives and how they have lost a 20-point lead in the polls. Carney said the person responsible for planting the buttons has been reassigned within the Liberal campaign.
But on behalf of my campaign, I apologize for it unreservedly. Okay. I've made it absolutely clear to my campaign that this behavior or anything approximating it or in that spirit is unacceptable, cannot happen again.
This gaffe isn't a good look for Carney's campaign, especially since he committed to serious and positive discourse over these 5 weeks. It's unclear if it'll affect public opinion polls, which continue to show the Liberals are ahead. Sandy?
Mike Lecouture. Now, as for the NDP, Jagmeet Singh was all about plans for a better healthcare system, specifically the need to hire more public nurses and pay them more. CTV's Abigail Beeman is on this, and what else Singh had to say. Abigail.
Sandy, the NDP point to a shortage of 32,000 nurses across the country and offered a few suggestions to fill the gap. They want to fast-track accreditation for internationally trained nurses, actively recruit American nurses, stop relying on private agencies, require provinces to meet nurse-to-patient ratios, and tie new health transfer money to hiring and retention. And Singh connected healthcare to a different and major campaign issue, Donald Trump's threats.
But we know he's got his targets on healthcare in Canada. And so a part of the fight back and saying, no, we don't want to be the 51st state, we want to defend who we are as a country, is defending the values that we care about. And one of those values is that we take care of each other. And what represents that value is universal health care.
A lot of these ideas are things we've heard from the NDP before, and that's part of their messaging now in week 4 of the campaign. Consistency. It's a what you see is what you get message. At every opportunity, Singh reminds voters that with just 25 MPs in the House of Commons, the NDP were able to make big wins on pharmacare and dental care. And in the face of Donald Trump tariffs, campaign sources tell CTV News healthcare is still top of mind for voters, and they point out other leaders aren't talking about it as much. Singh upset healthcare won't be a topic at the leaders' debate this week. As for the New Democrats' low standing in the polls, today Singh pushed back. He believes polls, while legitimate, are not accurately capturing NDP support. Sandy?
All right, thank you, Abigail. Okay, let's bring in Chief Political Correspondent Vassy Kapelas. And Vassy, let's pick up on the polls. Now, we just heard how the NDP are interpreting the numbers. I know that you've been talking to the other campaigns about how they see the race and the polls. And what are they telling you?
Yeah, I really wanted to do that today, Sandy, because I think the story of public opinion polling and the degree to which it has swung since last year in particular has been a big part of the narrative overall of this campaign. And I wanted to get a sense from inside those campaigns if they were seeing something similar, because of course they do their own internal polling as well. I have to say, from my conversations with 2 highly placed people in the Liberal campaign, their polling, they say, is even at this juncture better for them in their view than what we're seeing through public opinion polls in the aggregate. They foresee, for example, a majority win in their case at this point in time. The Conservatives also see a better picture for themselves because they don't think that the modeling fully captures their level of support across the country. And they feel like things are very competitive, which helps inform, I think, and this wasn't just like spinners, right, Cindy? Like, these are people who actually look at the numbers. They feel that it's so competitive that that is why, or helps to explain why, they have doubled down on their messaging around affordability rather than embrace the so-called pivot that the punditry class has said that they need to make. So 2 different stories from inside the campaigns, but it helps explain, I think, the way that they're going about the campaign as well.
And fascinating also in view of the fact that we've got these debates on Wednesday and Thursday, right? So what insight do you have in terms of debate preps at this point?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I am told by the people I was speaking in the Liberal campaign that the French one is of more concern to Mark Carney, but in both cases they're working hard on the outside to kind of temper expectations so that that expectation setting factors in. And on the Conservative side, they're going to keep going at this point. The plan is to keep going with announcements even on the day of the French debate. At this juncture, that might change, but that's the plan for now, Sandy.
All right, Vassy Kapelas, thank you. Well, the number of people seeking asylum at a major border crossing near Montreal is increasing rapidly.
The threat of mass deportation in the United States. He actually canceled, revoked some programs that these people were in.
Quebec border officials logged more than 1,300 applications at the Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle crossing in March. That's almost double from the month before. And in just the first 6 days of April, more than 500 asylum seekers crossed over from the United States. Of course, the issue of immigration and deportation was front and center when Donald Trump welcomed El Salvador's president to the White House today. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin is with us. Joy, you know, there's been backlash over Trump's massive deportations, including a man who was wrongly sent to El Salvador. So brief us on his situation and what came out of that conversation between the leaders.
Yeah, Sandy, it's pretty clear the Trump administration has no intention of bringing a Maryland father back home. This after the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the government to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, the Trump administration admits it was their mistake. They made an error that Garcia was deported to that notorious Salvadorian prison. But President Trump's officials insist, without evidence, that Garcia is a criminal and that the ball is now in El Salvador's court. But in the Oval Office today, President Bukele says he won't be releasing Garcia anytime soon. Here's what he said.
The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
And Joy, at the same time, Donald Trump appears to have plans for American criminals. What did he say?
He sure does. The U.S. is paying El Salvador $6 million to house criminals deported from America. It's a big part of Trump's crackdown on immigration and gangs. It's what he campaigned on. But the president said he'd like to go further and deport what he calls dangerous American citizens. Trump says he's studying the law to see if he can do it. Take a listen.
They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
You know, Sandy, President Trump said he wants to deport as many people as possible, and he seems to have found a kindred spirit in the Salvadorian president. Sandy?
All right, Joy, thank you for this. Now, Donald Trump once again blamed Ukraine for being the aggressor in the war with Russia.
When you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war.
Trump's comments come a day after a Russian attack killed dozens of Ukrainians gathered to celebrate Palm Sunday. And the U.S. president spoke about another potential tariff exemption, this time for the auto industry.
I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here.
Trump also said that he's looking at new tariffs on computer chips and pharmaceuticals. Okay, 6 women, including pop star Katy Perry, made history today, blasting off into space. CTV's John Vandevalley joins us now with why today was memorable on so many levels. John.
Sandy, this is the latest example of celebrities and space tourism, but a milestone mission as well.
And here we come. Here we go.
Never before has the world seen a group of only women climb into a capsule.
2, 1, ignition.
And blast off, headed to just past the edge of space.
Liftoff.
This, the historic scene.
New Shepard has cleared the tower.
As a fully autonomous Blue Origin rocket roared skyward. On board 6 women, including journalist Gayle King, pop star Katy Perry, and Lauren Sanchez, the fiancée of Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos. Sanchez personally chose the other members of the crew.
Mach 1, vehicle is supersonic.
A flight that lasted nearly 11 minutes, and as they reached 0G, King's close friend Oprah Winfrey watched with tears in her eyes.
Take us space!
From their capsule, the women could see the Earth below. Katy Perry brought a daisy, which is the name of her daughter, and they all experienced the joy of weightlessness before Perry began to sing What a Wonderful World.
They are cruising back home.
The capsule then parachuting safely back down to Earth. And as they emerged, Katy Perry kissed the ground, as did King.
And now that I've done it, I really do feel I can take on anything.
The crew hopes their trip will inspire other women.
It's about a collective energy in there. It's about us. It's about making space for future women.
Of the more than 700 people who've gone to space, only about 15% have been women, though the flight had its critics.
Is it historic that you guys are going on a ride? I mean, I think it's a bit over the top.
Perry says she plans to write a song about the experience. And the crew have said they hope everyone someday gets a chance to go on a similar flight.
Right.
Sandy.
Okay, John, thanks. Coming up, changing the outlook for treating obesity. Canada has new guidelines for treating children and adolescents living with obesity, and it comes with a new approach. CTV's Heather right now on the change and possible impact on young people. Heather.
Well, Sandy, these guidelines have not been updated since 2007 and include 10 recommendations that range from family-centered care to weight loss medication.
Obesity is a complex chronic disease that impacts thousands of Canadian children, and rates are on the rise.
We now have a lot better understanding of obesity as a chronic disease and how it works. And so the recommendations, focus on early intervention and making sure that timely care happens.
Roughly 25% of children between 4 and 11 and 33% of those aged 12 to 17 have a body mass index that may indicate they are overweight or obese. Not only does obesity increase the risk of more than 200 different health conditions, the study also highlights the stigma associated with obesity.
We know that weight stigma and bias exists in our society. It's something that's very prevalent in all aspects of our life, so from healthcare to education to the workplace. And we know that it starts early on.
The study suggests not simply treating the individual behaviors of a child, but rather providing care for the whole family. GLP-1 medication like Ozempic or Wegovy and surgery are also recommended when appropriate.
We're not suggesting that everyone living with obesity should be taking a medication or should be going for bariatric surgery, particularly in the pediatric population, but they are evidence-based treatment options that are available.
The report also says early intervention is key, as roughly 80% of adolescents who are obese will carry the condition with them into adulthood. Sandy.
Heather, thank you. And the family of deceased Canadian NHL player and Stanley Cup champion Chris Simon says the effects of CTE have been discovered in his brain. Simon was known as one of the toughest enforcers of his era. Took his own life last March. He was 52 years old. And following his death, the family donated his brain to be studied by the Boston University CTE Center. In a statement, the family described the struggles Simon endured due to his illness. Well, if you own a bicycle, a warning from police. That story when CTV National News returns. Cyclists are pumping their tires and gearing up for the season, but police have issued a warning. We asked CTV's Paul Hollingsworth in Halifax to find out what has them concerned. Paul?
Sandy, bike usage is up, and police say thieves are taking advantage of what they call a crime of opportunity.
With the growing city, people are using their bike as their main mode of transportation now. Constantly seeing people on their bikes, even during the winter time.
It appears more bikes on streets and roads across the country is linked to an increase in crime. The latest stats show Toronto leading Canadian cities with almost 3,000 stolen bikes reported. In Halifax, the numbers are lower but on the rise. Bike theft almost doubled in 1 year. According to police, it's causing a major inconvenience.
It is their mode of transportation, not just for activities on the weekend, but to and from work.
Like anything, theft is up for a lot of different stuff.
The owner of this bike shop has seen a recent jump in stolen bikes. He tells his customers when they make a purchase, protect their investment.
Get a proper lock, one that's hard to break and things like that, and then lock it up in a good spot, well lit, lots of people moving around. And then if you're going to keep it indoors, keep it in, a safe spot in your house.
Police are also asking bike owners to take pictures of their bikes and have their serial number registered with the National Bike Registry. It could help with insurance, and it gives police a chance to track down a stolen bike. Sandy.
All right, Paul. Well, the Blue Jays have officially inked Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to a team record 14-year, $500 million U.S. contract.
The city of Toronto and all the fans, thank you for the love and the support. Thank God we did it, and I'm going to be Blue Jay forever.
Guerrero thanked the Blue Jays and fans for believing in him and said, when a country gives you love, you got to give it back. And CTV National News will be right back. We've been checking in with Canadians ahead of this month's election to hear what issues are top of mind. And today we're in Summerside, Prince Edward Island, and that is where we find CTV's Sarah Plowman.
The sea is part of Summerside. With 17,000 people, it can feel like a town, but it's PEI's second largest city and a hub for this region. To find voters, we headed to the Community Sports Hub. What matters most to you this election?
For this election, I'm particularly concerned for young people and where they are with jobs and housing.
The economy and the carbon tax drop on that, I think that was a big thing.
Voters like Ed Nickerson are following the race closely.
I want a government that's going to stand up to Trump.
Others want change 20 minutes from here. To leave the island, drivers must pay a $50 toll at the Confederation Bridge.
Reducing the bridge toll or getting rid of it, I think, would be good for islanders.
The mayor points out how municipalities continue to face new challenges, things like housing, homelessness, but also here on the ocean, a key issue is climate adaptation.
So something like sea level rise and how do we adapt for changing climate, how do we prepare for that is really, really important.
Summerside's mayor also wants more funding for municipalities as they take on more.
I don't think there's one municipality across Canada that thinks it's fully funded.
But this senior who works part-time says the priority should be health care.
New doctors, more nurses, right?
Voters have a long list of issues they want fixed, but are also tired of lofty promises.
Canadians are not stupid. We know there's things that they cannot do until they get into Parliament, until it goes through legislation and gets passed.
A window into what matters here and their view of the best path forward. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Summerside, Prince Edward Island.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up. We'll see you tomorrow, we hope.